Hey, what's up guys? Back with another quick tutorial. I figured I would do a tutorial about mixing. At first I was like, well, this is going to be a pretty quick mix, so I don't need to do a video. And then I remembered the most important thing I could remember, that it's always something that another person doesn't know, no matter how simple it is. So here we are, we're back. All right, so the first thing I want to do, and I realized that when I got to some point when I was messing with EQ, I had a little trick that I was like, oh wow, a lot of people don't know this. So let's just do a tutorial. So the first thing I'm going to do is just play the static beat. And this is with all the volumes just at one volume. It's nothing balanced. Everything is just at one static volume. So you can hear that, you can hear every instrument and that kind of thing. But now we need to work on some balance. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this back to unity gain, which is 0. I had to bring it down because it was going to be too loud in your ears. And now I'm just going to solo each instrument. I want to start with the kick and just balance everything out by volume. When I went to Sheffield Institute for the Recording Arts here in Maryland, one of the first things that they taught us was to get your mix as simple as possible first. Work with the simplicities of a mix. Before you start diving into really super heavy effects and changing everything, try to get the best mix that you can get with volume, panning, EQ, and compression. And to this date, that is my approach to mixing. It's very simple. I won't win Grammy Awards, with my mixing. It's just to be able to make a very listenable recording and to make it just decent for normal people who want to just enjoy music. All right, so here we go. So I'm going to first work with the volumes, starting with the kick. Okay, so that's a pretty decent volume. Everything will come more into focus as we allow the other instruments to come in. So next up, I would do snare under normal conditions next, but in this beat, I want the snare to be tucked behind the snaps and the claps. So what I'm going to do is go to the snaps next, and then I'm going to come back to the snare. Actually, I'm going to go to the hi-hat first and then go from there. So this hi-hat is pretty heavy. I don't want it to dominate, so I'm going to stick it about there as far as volume. Let's go to the snaps next. So if you listen to the video of the making of this track, then you'll know that I was saying that this snap is a little secret weapon. A lot of times producers will use snaps in order to accentuate the percussive aspect of a snare. And so that's how I want to use it in this regard. All right, here we go. Next, I'm going to allow the claps into the equation. And I want these three to blend. Let me let you hear it by itself. And here's the second clap. Sorry, that was pretty loud. These claps are slightly different from one another as far as their timbre or texture. They're meant to feel a little bit off of each other, so I'm going to put one behind the other. This one is stronger, so I'm making this one softer. This one is a stronger, more firm clap. This one is lighter. So I'm going to put this behind that, introduce the snap, and now we have our claw. That's the sound that you're looking for on top of the snare, just that claw, claw, claw. All right, now let's put the snare in there and let's tuck the snare behind all that. So probably about there for now. Let's bring the kick and the hi-hat back in. Okay, I'm gonna take the snare down a little bit. About there. and I'm going to bring up a little bit more clap. Okay, a little bit more snare. Okay, now for some basic EQ. The first thing I'm going to do, which is where I decided, okay, I really do need to do a video for this. This hi-hat here. If you listen to this hi-hat closely, now this might be hard to hear unless your ear is tuned to frequencies. When I listen to this hi-hat, there's low frequency information on this hi-hat that I need to get out of there. And the way to do it is to come here to the EQ and to take this last frequency range right here and to roll off, to bring it up like this. If you notice, it's thinning out. This is before. It's very subtle. In fact, that's what I'll do to accentuate it so you can really hear it. I'll take this here and accentuate the low end on this hi-hat. It almost sounds like a kick drum. And that's just a part of the sample. What I'm going to do is get that out of there by rolling off the bottom. These are all low frequencies, so when I take this last part of the EQ up, it gets rid of all this mud. And now it's cleaner. Just a very small technique, and you can use this technique for cleaning up any instrument. Any instrument that has too much low information, you turn on the bottom EQ here. If you're in Logic, this is called a high pass. It allows the highs to pass by while it decreases the lows. So now that makes it a little bit cleaner. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is in the snare range. This is all EQ. In the snare range between 2 and 4K, this is what we call the intelligibility range. A lot of times this is where your snare hit is, like the meat of it, the pop of it. Right now I'm just narrowing down the frequency range. And I know I'm doing this pretty fast. I'm doing this intentionally fast because I just want to do this video to spark questions and to see who would be interested in learning more. And from there, based on your questions, I'll know exactly what topics to base the future videos around. So I'm just doing this just to bring out the pop of the snare. Just a little bit. And that's it. It's very subtle. Very subtle. Okay. Next up, the kick. Basically, in the kick, a lot of times you'll have mud in the 300 to 500 range. You'll have some mud where if you clean it out, it just gives a nice roundness to the kick. This is what it sounds like if I boost it up. If I take it away, you notice it getting more round. And I'm just going to do just about that much. Again, I'll explain EQ in better detail in future videos. For right now, I just want to kind of do a quick run through. So now the kick is better in that regard. Next up, let's check on the snap. Now you don't have to put an effect on everything. You just listen for certain things that your ear wants to hear or that you know the listener may want to hear. One thing about mixing that we learned in school that I think is an important way of thinking about it is it's just like using spices in your food. You don't want to just overload things with salt. And sometimes, even if you know it needs salt, you don't want to just start throwing salt on it. You want to taste it first and season to taste. You literally want to mix to taste, just like seasoning. Don't just get in there and just start throwing effects all over the place. You'll find yourself in a big mess. And then you'll have to go back to the drawing board anyway because it won't be a way to fix it once it's, really messy. Again, it's just like food. It's just like throwing too much sugar and too much salt or too much milk into food. It becomes a mess after a while. You have to start over. So, to be honest, my snaps, they feel really good to me. I'm just going to leave them alone. Okay. The claps sound great too, but I'm going to show one little trick that I use. It's a very subtle thing. If you clap your hands together and you clap the middle of your palms, you'll hear a certain frequency that's like, it reminds you of a snare, like when you hit a snare perfectly, that pop. And if you clap and listen to that sound, that's what I go for when EQing. Each clap is different, so I have to boost the frequency range in each area, so that way I can find it. So here we go. So it's about here. I don't even know what to call this. This is something that I just figured out on my own using my ear and, you know, that kind of thing. It's like the meat of the clap. So for this clap, it's right here in the 1K range. So I'm just going to narrow it down so that I only boost that range, and I'm going to do it slightly. I'll boost it up loud so you can hear it first. It's like a little pop. I'm going to bring it down. It's very subtle. The only reason why I want this is because, again, it'll add to that pop or that sound, you know, for the snare, clap, and snaps. See how it sounds in context. So I feel that pop there. I'm going to boost up the kick a little bit more too. Okay. For right now, to keep it simple, that's about it for EQ. Okay, next up, a little bit of compression. Now, compression, again, another one of those seasoned to taste, and then we'll be done with this segment. Compression is just being able to control the dynamic range of the instruments. There's a lot of times when the instruments are competing with each other as far as volume, and so sometimes, like with this kick, you'll want it to thump, but you'll want to keep it controlled. So compression is a way of slightly just reeling in and just putting a leash on your instruments so that they sound big and fat, or however they're supposed to sound, real crystal clear and nice, while not competing with each other as far as dynamic range. So the compressor that I'm going to use is one of my favorites, which is the Waves C1. And I'm pretty much going to use this on all the tracks to keep it simple. Like I said, I mix at a very, very simple way. Now, I know for some of you all this might not be simple, but I promise you, if you get into professional engineering, this is very simple. So I'm not going to explain this in entirety. I'm just going to run through it to keep it short. What I look for is here. This is the sound, and here's my device for measuring how much I'm going to decrease this sound. I like to think of it as taking the edge off of the sound and then putting it back in there. So I'm going to go to about a ratio of 1:25 to 1. This may be very hard to hear, but it quieted the kick and it sounds a little bit more controlled. It's not wild. Now, if I click this tells me how much I'm decreasing the sound. I'm decreasing it by at least 4 decibels each time. So here I'm going to make that up by adding, I like to add a third to a half back with this plugin. And if you notice, it sounds like it's thumping actually even more. So it's thumping more, but it's more controlled than it was before. Let's listen to it in context. And now I also can turn it up because it's not as wild and out of control. So it's nice and round and it thumps. All right. I'm going to do the same thing for the snare. I'm going to keep it really simple. So I'm just going to copy and paste that plugin over. So here we got the compressor here. I'm just going to copy it and put it right there. And then I'm going to go into it so I can see if I need to tweak it. So here's the snare. First, let me take the threshold off. Now, I really like to use this to boost up sound because watch this. You hear where it is now. Let me take this to 0 so you can hear it flat. As first, it's going to bring the sound down. So it's a little bit quieter. Just taking the edge off. But now, let's see how much is decreasing. So at least 3.5 decibels. So now I'm going to put some of that back. This is the makeup gain. When you're pushing from inside the plugin after the compression, you're boosting the compressed sound up. And now if you notice, when I put that 3 decibels back, it pops. Let me let you hear before and after. So this is after, before, after, before. So I know somebody's saying, I can't hear a difference at all. And I'm going to be honest with you, that's actually a good thing. To be honest, a good engineer, here's a little sidebar, thing that I came up with. What's the best compliment that an engineer can get? When someone is listening to a song that an engineer mixed, what's the absolute best compliment that they can get? So I'm not sure what you thought about or what your answer was, but the answer is, wow, that singer really can sing. Or wow, these people really are singing, they're singing to their heart's content. Basically, transparency is the best thing that you can be as an engineer. So the best compliment that you can get is that the music sounds great. Not so much that, oh wow, the EQ sounds amazing or the compression sounds amazing. That means that it was visible. Now there will be some times when it is, visible or not visible. We're not using eyes. You guys get what I'm saying. It's actually audible. But the truth of the matter is that if you do your job perfectly, it just sounds like a perfectly good natural recording. And what you did more than add to the recording was to take away all of the bad stuff and to just accentuate the good stuff. So less is more. So with this overall, this sounds much more punchy. That's what compression does. It allows the recording to sound much more punchy. So what I'll do now is boost the snare up a bit because now that it's more controlled, I can boost it up a bit and allow it to just give that punch. Now this is a click track, so I'm not going to boost it up as much. This is a click track that has a snare in it. Most click tracks will have a sound that's in the place of a snare, but the snare will be left open for the drummer, and maybe there'll be another smaller snare or some other kind of pop sound, something that represents a snare and is layered nicely with a real snare. This has an actual snare in it, so in order to balance out the difference, I'm going to bring it down some so that a drummer doesn't feel like he or she is overpowered by the snare and they feel supported. And really the same thing goes with the hi-hats. Usually this hi-hat pattern would not be a part of the click track because the drummer will play that. But with this particular song that this was made for, and you can use this for any song that you like actually. The funny thing is when I was listening to it, the song that I heard was Stevie Wonder, Superstition. Dun, 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 dun. Anyway. All right. So next we have snaps and claps as far as EQ. And to be honest, I'm going to treat these the same exact way. I'm pretty much going to treat this entire track the same way. I'm not going deep into mixing. I'm just applying a very simple approach just to bring out what's already there. So the first track we have it on is snaps. Okay, first thing is I look at where the snap crosses the line to just take the edge off. And now that's not much. I'll give it a little bit more. I want to keep it subtle. So I'll take about that much off, and then let's see how much is being decreased. Okay, at least 1.5 decibels. So I'll just add 1 back. I'll add the whole 1.5 back. Again, this is after the compression. So you're taking away volume, or you're controlling dynamics. But with the volume that's taken away, you can add it back with your makeup gain. So I think that's pretty good. And to be honest, I'm going to take this same setting and I'm going to apply it to the other 2 claps, because they kind of play the same role, or similar role. I am going to take down the makeup gain because the claps are a bit more aggressive. So I'm going to take it down to 1 decibel for both claps. 1 decibel of makeup gain. And that's about it. Now the very last thing that I'm going to do, there would be a couple more steps that I would do kind of in like a icing on a cake process, especially to the master fader. What I'm going to do right now, just to show you one of those things that I do, is I'm going to add to the stereo out, which is everything is going to this stereo out fader here. I'm going to add a limiter because I want to show you one little trick to take your mixes, even if you're a beginning mix engineer, this will take your mixes from amateur to having a sound that's kind of like in your face with a few steps. So this sounds pretty good so far. But what I'm going to do, if I want to really boost this up, is on this stereo out track, I'm going to open up a waves limiter. It's one of my other favorite little secret weapons. I only have a few because my mixing style is not that deep. Now what this does, this is an ultra maximizer. Sounds like something off of like Men in Black or something. What this ultra maximizer does is, this is a hardcore compressor. We call it a limiter. It's a brick wall compressor. And what it does is it has a ceiling. It only lets the sound come up to a certain place. And then from there, we can actually boost the sound, the overall volume of the compressed version of the sound. Again, this is just like a compressor. It's a brick wall limiter. It doesn't allow the sound to go past at all a certain threshold. So the easy way of thinking about this is that you use this in order to make the sound even bigger. So we usually use a -0.01 ceiling. This is like a protector. I mean, at 0, it won't go past the sound. If it was coming all the way up here, it wouldn't go past 0. But as I learned, we just do -0.1 just for mathematics and making sure of that. And then on this side, as we pull this down, you'll notice the sound getting louder. Okay. Now, because of the fact that I don't know how loud this will be in your ears, I'm going to keep it down to a minimum. So I'll just keep it about here. I'll take it down just a little bit more. So what's happening here is I'm actually adding 5.5 more decibels of gain to the overall volume. This is the volume here. And this is what I'm adding to it. It's interesting because, I mean, it says decreasing. I would have to show you in a different kind of diagram. You are smashing the dynamic range more and thereby actually increasing it by the same amount. Now, if I turn this down for a second so I don't blow your heads off, and I really smash this, you're going to notice something over here. You're going to see the limiter actually start kicking in and attenuating the sound. That was the word I was looking for earlier. Attenuating the sound, decreasing the sound. And it's going to show you by how much it's decreasing the sound as that sound tries to go past the ceiling of -0.1. So it's pushing it down each time this amount. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4 or 5. And that's okay. That's how you know how much you're attenuating, and this is your final output. So at any rate, I'm gonna just back this up. I'm gonna put the volume back kind of loud so that way I can give you all a realistic feel. And lastly, I'll just drag this down so you can start to hear the change in volume. Turn this down a little bit. I'll start dragging this down. You'll hear a change in volume. This is how people are competing on the radio. It's what we call, it leads to what we call loudness wars. I try not to participate in loudness wars. We'll get into that in another video. But this is what it's all about, because the better you do this, or the more aggressively, I won't even say better because it's pretty subjective. I don't like really smashed mixes that are too big, because then your ear can't get away from the sound, so to speak. It makes sense in pop and some other genres that are loud, and especially genres dealing with dance music, but it can be pretty fatiguing on the ear. But as you saw there, the sound got louder and more in your face. That's how you come up with a final recording, and this is limiting. So that's about it. I hope you all enjoyed this video for what it was worth. Please drop as many questions as you like. I know this was a lot in a short period of time, and I know I skipped over a lot of things or breezed through things. So the only way that I'll know what topics to address in future videos is if you leave comments in the description. So please leave comments below, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. So there was one more part of the equation that I forgot. I don't know how I did. Panning. So the basic approach to mixing is volume first, then panning, then EQ and compression. And I forgot about the panning. So panning, for those of you all that don't know, is dealing with the left and right range of the stereo spectrum. The stereo spectrum is not flat. You have left, right, and then you have front and rear. And it's just like any other kind of three-dimensional space we have. This is just auditory dimensional space. So anyway, I just wanted to apply one simple concept here. And the reason for panning is that when you have everything that's coming through the center of your speaker, everything is competing literally for the center of your speaker. So what you'd rather do is to spread it out. If you were looking at an orchestra, everybody wouldn't be lined up directly in front of you. They would be spanned across the spectrum from left to right. So there are times when you want to treat your instruments the same way. So in this case, where I'm going to apply panning is on the claps. So listen to this. So that's my clap. I'm going to take this clap and move it left. Let me do it in real time so you can hear it. So you notice it's starting to move left. And then I'm going to take this clap here and move it right. You can hear it shifting. Now when I combine them together, it sounds like there's two people clapping as opposed to just one clap straight up the middle. And that sounds more realistic, because if you had two people in the studio recording next to each other clapping, they would have to have space in between them. So now when you put that all together with the beat, here's what you have. And that's about it for panning. There are many other instruments, like say you take the kick, you take the snare. Your kick you don't want to really pan. Let me just demonstrate that. Not in this case. I mean, there will be some cases where you want to do some type of interesting panning effects with the kick, for sure. We'll do that in some future videos where you can see how amazingly we break these rules. But for right now, this beat, the kick is the foundation. So if I did this and started to move the kick here, to your right ear, that would feel awkward. We need the kick right in the center to hold down the track. Same thing with the snare. If I move the snare, say to the left, it's way out there. That doesn't, it kind of throws you off balance. So we want that in the middle. The hi-hat, there are times when you do want to pan the hi-hat. If I pan this a little right, you can hear this. When we do this, it's because we're looking at the spectrum either from the drummer's perspective, looking out toward the audience, or the audience looking at the drummer. Right now, and of course this depends on if you're a right-handed or left-handed drummer, but I base it on being right-handed because most drummers are right-handed. There are more right-handed people in the world. Sorry, left-handed people. I love you. My mom is left-handed. But I think about it because I'm right-handed. I think about it in this way. If I pan right, and if I was thinking about a drummer's hi-hat being on the right side, and if he or she was right-handed, then that would mean I would be looking at them from the audience perspective because their hi-hat is on the right. And if they're on the right, if they're right-handed, then automatically their hi-hat is going to be slightly to the right. So this would be audience perspective of the drummer. That's right-handed. But you can also switch it to left. You know, it really comes down, you know, even more than that perspective. That's the only way you go for a perspective of a drummer is if your goal is to make it a live sounding environment in your mix. If it's not, and you're just going for effects or you're just spreading things around, trying to give everything its own space, it really doesn't matter. You just season to taste. You know, you could have your hi-hat on the left if you wanted to. Now, the only reason why in this recording I'm going to leave it in the center is because I don't have any other competing instruments in that range. If I had some other instruments that were holding down 8th notes or 16th notes that was going, say, off of the hi-hat, like if I had a second hi-hat pattern, then I would move them in different directions so that you can get that bouncing going back and forth. But for right now, I kind of see the hi-hat in this particular beat as a part of the foundation. So I actually want to leave this right up the middle, like the kick and the snare, and just allow those two claps to give us some spatial dimension here. And same thing with the snaps. I just kind of want the snaps right on top of the snare, right up the middle. So that's in context. And once again, here's our claps by themselves. Sounds like two people. That's about it. Thanks so much for watching.